just about the history. I want to go the whole hog, like last time and the time before, so roll on the prologue. Last time it was about war, and what it was good for. The 8th century was bellicose, you can't deny it. With Tarak Tours and Talus, violence had not subsided, and in 793, according to monkish writings, Lindisfarne was looted by axe-brandishing Vikings. This time I really hope to see a focus on diplomacy, trade, imperial reconfigurations, marriages of state, regal manipulations. Dynastic intermarriages can strengthen and enforce political alliances and halt or prevent wars. Alexander the Great, who gave his name to Alexandria after the siege of Sogdian Rock, where the bride from Bactria, Roxana, to placate the populace in 327 BC, or so said the Acropolis. Mary, Queen of Scots, married a Frenchman, and Astrid of Sweden married Leopold of Belgium. For strategic diplomacy and political alliance, future claims, and a hope to see less bloodshed and violence. International trade, furthermore, is portrayed as a way to evade war and to gain new products and markets too. If we look back to History of the World Part 2, transported along the ancient Silk Road were such things as wine, horses, honey and gold, while travelling to Rome, Egypt and Greece were Chinese silk, perfumes, porcelain and teas, prompting diplomatic and commercial dispatches while generating wealth for the mercantile classes. And we'll see in this episode how the Rus left their abode of Denmark and Kiev, as far as I believe, and paraded and traded a display of Slavic slaves, making them stable and prosperous from Kiev to the Bosphorus, avoiding battles in the next port with their import and export. Now, who inherits the empire in a withered condition when it's riddled with schisms and civil divisions, and before it turns quickly into the scene of a crime? Maybe all contenders can have a piece of the pie. I'm talking about partition or subdivision, which isn't a decision some emperors envision. Think how many empires were subdivided, or countries like Korea or Poland. They decided to split the Roman Empire into west and east parts, and the Carolingian Empire into 3 parts. Well, stay tuned to hear of Charlemagne, illustrious king of Aquitaine, and his death causing factions between his 3 warring grandsons. And why battle and overthrow when you're the power behind the throne? Margaret of Anjou advised Henry VI and Ivan the Terrible, Tsar Bek-Bulatovich. Pedro V of Congo was client king for the Portuguese. Emperors Gojong and Sonjong, puppets for the Japanese. These rulers ruled a country, I don't mean to understate, but were run by a puppet master in a puppet state. Some may think this jiggery pokery is not akin to diplomacy, but after war a puppet king may prevent more war, pulling strings, other things, manipulations to ascend higher, as trade and royal weddings cement the state, reconfigurations of the empire, and all these means of subterfuge, diplomacy essentially, can be seen in the emperors, kings and queens of the 9th century. The 9th century witnessed the birth in Cambodia of Jayavarman II. It's reckoned he founded the Empire of Khmer, or Khmer, phonologically they say, which was without doubt, however it's pronounced, an empire which lasted over 600 years, which is longer than Imperial Rome or the Han Dynasty, but not as long as the Holy Roman or the Byzantine. Still, 600 years, it's a bit absurd. I bet you had no idea that Thailand, Laos and Vietnam were once part of Cambodia. Or with a moat more than 5 kilometers long, historians have concurred that Ankor Wat is the largest religious structure in the world. It seems like it was meant to be a temple building century, for Borobodur was a temple that whose stupas were abundant with Buddhist statues and was built in 825 in Java to aid budding Buddhists attain nirvana. In that humid solarium just below the equator, it was abandoned half a millennium later. Now I'm sure it can't be hard to strain your memory back again half a dozen decades to those hearty days of Charlemagne. For Charlemagne, or Charles the Great, was great at getting things done, be it battling Muslims, hunting customs, or doubling his kingdom. Now if you think you've heard that bit before, you have, but could you foresee that Charlemagne, king of Aquitaine, would die in 814, causing the factions of his 3 warring grandsons to decide in Verdun to subdivide his empire when he expired, and determine that Louis gained East Francia, or modern Germany, and Lotharingia, Holland, Austria, Italy, and all of France, or Francia, as it was then called, went to the youngest and most hairless, namely Charles the Bald, for kings in their time were defined by hairline, receding, rounded or high, their personality or physicality, their beard, that's weird, or whimsicality. Selim the Blonde, Bela the Blind, Vladislaw the Elbow High, Sverker the Clubfoot, Richard the Crookbank, Ferdinand the Desired, John George the Beer Jug, Baldwin the Bearded, Manuel the Bibliophile, Harold the Harefoot, Ivor the Boneless, Vladislaw the Exile. And remember the looting of Lindisfarne and the sacrilege of St. Cuthbert? Well, the Vikings had taken the liking to fighting villagers and such, but with their constant raiding, trading, invasions, Europe couldn't maintain law, and after capturing York, renaming it Jorvik, Guthrum ruled the Danelaw, colonising East Anglia in essence, and fighting, when invited, King Alfred of Wessex. Meanwhile, the Chinese had invented gunpowder, which guaranteed and meant warfare was much louder. With exploding saltpeter and sulfur, they made a flaming arrow launcher. Europe copied them much later. There were also several marriages of state between the Tang dynasty and the Uyghur Khaganate, exchanging princesses in compliance or defiance to consolidate trade and military alliance. And even Japanese may not remember the Fujiwara clan, regent to the child emperor, Seiwa. He was a puppet and his views were immaterial, but this was standard practice. Then, in the Heian period, Fujiwara princes were high ministers and known as regents for young monarchs and the power behind the throne. This can arise when a samurai, who is rather high, enforces his law with consorts of all sorts who support his laws, and how they shall apply. They just stand by and comply with concord, otherwise contend with the business end of a samurai sword. Elsewhere, Cyril and Methodius converted the Slavs of Bulgaria to Christianity, which seemed insanity in the Constantinople area, so they turned to the Pope for his blessing with a long list of FAQs, wrote a Bible in Cyrillic, made the national church idyllic with an archbishop to to express their views. And in 882, Oleg, who'd sailed down the Dnieper, became king of Kiev as the Rus, not Vikings, were trading, not raiding creatures. Their vessels were lighter, more riverine to navigate Russian rivers, and they voyaged east to Byzantium, not west, and so they differed from the Viking raiders of Lindisfarne or Paris or York or Greenland, growing rich from their trade of furs, honey and slaves, which financially was ideal, and stable and prosperous from Kiev to the Bosphorus. Let's finish this century with a king who we've mentioned before. He halted the advance of the Danes and enhanced England with schools, law and jewellery, and fortified towns to defend Wessex from the Vikings who raped, pillaged, plundered Northumbria and Mercia mercilessly, forcing the kingdom to be sundered into Wessex and English Mercia, which was ruled by King Alfred the Great, and Northumbria and Danish Mercia became Guthrum's Danelaw state. Sick of the battling, kingdom dismantling by these maddening, vicious Vikings, the English borders were redrawn and quartered in 888. So with Guthrum and gunpowder and England's division by kings, the Rus and Fujiwara clan, we end century number 8.